Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Entrepreneurial Echoes, a podcast designed to provide more information about entrepreneurship. I'm Praneet Saja.
I'm Aman Modi.
And I'm Ryan Ho.
We are back in business, a project aiming to help raise awareness and develop careers related to entrepreneurship. It is our great pleasure to have Shelby Hudson, manager of Code Ninja Cedar Park, to give some insights into entrepreneurship and share her own experience. Good morning, Shelby. Good afternoon, Shelby. Thank you for spending your valuable time for being a guest with us today.
Hi.
Okay, so just to begin with, I just have a quick question regarding the demographics in Code Ninjas. So, Shelby, can you introduce yourself and give our audience some insight into Code Ninjas and its demographics?
Yes, my name is Shelby. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm the center director here at Code Ninja Cedar Park. We're located around the Austin area, which is a really fast and growing area. I am 19 years old and I'm also a student at Austin Community College. So sorry, guys. I'm studying accounting. And Code Ninjas is just such a unique business that I'm really happy to be a part of. We're a program that teaches computer science to ages 5 through 14.
That's amazing. Actually, I didn't know that you were like being an entrepreneur this young is so amazing because usually people who want to enter entrepreneurship and business like after around like 23, 24, but it's really cool that you're getting to experience this at such a young age. That's really nice to know.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience for sure.
All right. And moving on from that, Shelby, how do you think COVID-19 affected Code Ninjas in a way? Like, what were the major changes that y'all had to experience before and after the pandemic?
Yeah. So as everyone knows, the pandemic was very rough on most businesses. What we all experienced in 2020 was something that nobody was really ready for. And for a small period of time, Code Ninjas had to actually shut down before we were able to adapt and kind of change the business model. And we were able to open up the virtual options. But even with the virtual options, we lost many customers. As a business, you have to keep your employees and your customers safe, but you also have to listen to what their wants are. Being virtual, it's impossible to give the same experience virtual that you can give in person. In person, you're able to create bonds and relationships that it's just hard to do over the computer. Present day, I can confidently say we're recovering pretty nice. However, the pandemic is still affecting us. We have shifted back. All of our classes are in person, and we're taking all safety measures that we can with masks. We take temperatures, we social distance, and we disinfect between every child. However, some families do still prefer to stay home in order to stay safe.
That's really cool. And it's good that y'all were able to recover from that pandemic scenario.
You guys changed like your business model and things like that. So like what specifically, if you can, like tell us about how that process was like developed. Like how did you guys decide to go virtual? How did you guys like start recovering from the pandemic? Like things like that.
It's definitely really tough, but the biggest thing that you have to pay attention to is you need to listen to your customers based on everyone's feedback, and as well as creating new policies in order to keep everyone safe. You want to be able to provide the experience that the customers want while putting those safety measures in place. So again, what we did is we were just able to adapt and offer the virtual classes. And then once we were able to kind of move back into person, for a while we were doing both. We had the option of virtual and in person. So based on their preference, they are able to choose what they preferred. And once cases started dropping a little bit, we switched to fully in person because We've gotten feedback from our customers saying that they prefer the in-person over the virtual. The virtual has declined in its popularity because of a lot of kids, they were doing virtual schooling. So to add an extracurricular on top of that, the parents were really looking for that in person for their kids.
Right. I think I definitely relate to this experience because I did work virtually for almost 1.5 years. But then what happened eventually was that customers started dropping because they didn't start liking virtual experience. It was just more like a Q&A session rather than having actual bonding and connection to the kids. So I definitely feel that's an important part of Code Ninjas is to, that's one of the main parts of Code Ninjas that kids are missing on. So it's definitely great to be back in person and sort of how those experiences once again. So shifting away from the COVID-19 pandemic a little bit, can you focus on your journey on becoming an entrepreneur? What inspired you to choose this field and take on such an challenging field at such a young age?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back a little bit. So I actually got my first job when I was 14. I worked at a preschool. I worked there every summer and lightly during the year, and I was actually there for about 6 years. I then worked at Randall's, which is a grocery store, and I was cross-trained in 3 different departments. I was a Starbucks assistant manager, a file maintenance clerk, and a cashier. And then I kind of found Code Ninjas, and I started as an assistant director at Code Ninjas. My experience with kids is mainly what led me to Code Ninjas. And since I've worked there, I've kind of grown my love for computer science. Previous to working at Code Ninjas, I had no idea what computer science was. Everything I have learned on the job. And recently, as I've gotten more into it, I have been studying outside of work in order to kind of gain more knowledge in this field, because I think it's a very, very important field. It's definitely growing. There's a niche and a need for it. There's a lot of jobs in the STEM field, not just computer science, and computer science itself is definitely a need that needs to be met. There's a lot of jobs that can be filled. So I think it's a great field, and I'm glad to be able to kind of combine both my love for kids, but also computer science.
It's really cool that you started off really early with all your jobs and stuff. And I would also like to ask if you participated in any sort of business clubs or entrepreneurial activities in high school and college, offered by your school.
Yeah, so in high school, I was in a lot of clubs actually. I kind of filled my schedule with everything possible. I was an athlete. I played volleyball for 11 years actually. I played inside of school and outside of school. And being an athlete, that definitely taught me discipline that I needed. I was also in choir. But then kind of more on the business side of things, I was in several clubs. I was in Avid, Key Club, FCCLA, Young Life, and I also started 2 of my own clubs, which were Board Game Club and Puzzle Club. While those aren't very academic clubs, it did teach me a lot. I was able to, before I could even start the club, I had to prove to my principal that there were students interested in joining. Once I went around the school, I got signatures from people to prove to the principal that this was a club we're starting. I was able to kind of create those clubs, and then kind of like a business, I had to keep people coming and attending to my club. So what I did, I would bring cookies every week, and I would also just kind of create some fun themes as well as just make that inviting atmosphere. And that was definitely a great experience because it is very similar to kind of just opening up your own niche or small business. You have to kind of create that base of audience.
I really like how you sort of elaborated on your high school experiences and specifically your experiences with clubs and extracurricular activities, because I feel like a lot of students, especially like in our school at least, don't particularly realize how these activities can contribute just outside of high school and college, and potentially helping them choose the career itself. Like through your activities, I'm pretty sure you probably learn more about leadership experience, managing it, and just being responsible and accountable in general, which are definitely some of the most important skills in entrepreneurship. So even though they might not exactly be like, oh, it's not a business related activity, but still all those skills you learn from your experience in high school definitely helped you become like an entrepreneur and think you in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, even just the time management of combining everything in my schedule together is great experience in itself. And then you look into the different things that you learn in each club, and kind of also how to give back to the community, because that is a lot of things that clubs do focus on.
Definitely. Like it might not be like evident at first, like what the relation between like starting a school club and like managing a business is, but like there's so many connections between the two. Like you have to manage people and you have to collaborate with them. You need to get like approval from like higher authority, like as you said, like your principal to like start the club. And yeah, definitely giving back to the community as well, because that's an important part of business as well. Like making sure, like as you said, even Code Ninjas is doing right now, like making sure it's customer oriented, like it's like based on like who you're serving and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so shifting a little bit, so what are your thoughts about female representation in entrepreneurship? Like I know that business and entrepreneurship is has been generally a male dominated field, so what is it like being like a woman in business?
Yeah, so it is a little intimidating at first, but the more that you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, the better you're going to get at it. Personally, I do not see a difference between a female and a male entrepreneur. Even though it is dominated by males, I think what it takes to be an entrepreneur, both genders have what it takes. In my experience, it's all about your maturity and your work ethic. And I think I would be very happy to see more females kind of take on those roles and kind of put their strengths into being an entrepreneur. But I mean, again, like I said, I think it's all about how hard you're going to reach and go for it, but also how you're going to handle each situation and adapt.
Definitely. I mean, those skills are like required of any entrepreneur, any decision maker, regardless of like what gender you are, what race you are, anything like that. In fact, I think like the more diverse entrepreneurship, the better it is, because there's more like ideas and different perspectives, which always leads to like better ideas, more innovation, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's really cool to probably get a sort of perspective from that angle as well, because again, like even from our schools where we have accelerated incubator programs, there's not like it's mostly which are business programs. There's not a lot of female representation there. So I definitely find it cool that how you were sort of leading that example through Code Ninjas, because once again, Code Ninjas, one of the most popular branches for computer science and kids to learn coding. But still, like you're being one of the leaders in that, and I find that I find it very cool. So moving from sort of connecting back to that, so regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, when I'm pretty sure you became a manager right during the pandemic, and how did that particularly feel for you? Because if you're an ideal entrepreneur, you probably want to start in a like an easy sort of transition into it. Like how did it feel when you were immediately put into such situation like COVID-19 and sort of managing that? How did that initially feel?
It was definitely very interesting. I mean, I made the most that I could out of it. I did start at a pretty rough time when the business maybe had been struggling a little bit. But I was able to kind of take those experiences and kind of just push forward, keep looking into the future. How can we listen to our customers and how can we meet their feedback And it was just, I will say, yes, we've recovered a lot since then, and we're just trying to keep moving forward. The pandemic is not over, it's still happening. I still get customers every now and then that do drop off due to cases. However, being able to keep our safety measures in place, we haven't had any issues with any outbreaks in our center, which is something I'm very, very grateful for. And it's something that our customers are very happy with, that they can see that what we're doing is working and we're keeping their kids safe, our employees safe, and they're safe as well. It was very interesting. I worked at Randall's, a grocery store. It's right next to my apartment. And I started there when I was 17. I was a senior in high school when the pandemic started. It was very interesting. We went for spring break and then we never came back. And so after that, I moved out pretty quickly. I got a full-time job when I was 17. I had my own apartment, and it just made me mature really fast. And nobody, again, was prepared for the pandemic, but I personally spent time learning how to save, gaining experience, and exploring all my career options. There was not a lot of businesses open when the pandemic started, so you had to spend your time wisely. Some people may have just slacked off a little bit, but if you put your time to good use, those people came out of the pandemic a lot higher than the people who didn't put their time to good use.
For sure. Like, I feel like being put into like such a situation immediately was probably intimidating at our like beginning, but what happens eventually is like it's more like you have to take self actions and to start researching about what other companies are doing, what other businesses are doing, and sort of learn from those. And at the same time, thinking of what's best for the customer. As you mentioned, like at Code Ninjas, there's some customers that are dropping out because again of the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent COVID wave, but still you still have to be prepared to take on this risk and take actions towards sort of fixing that risk again, which is through safety measures and sticking to like one particular decision. Because as you just mentioned in the previous question, virtual wasn't the best option for the customers or for the kids. So I really like that sort of ability to immediately act upon because you're put into such a difficult situation like immediately.
Right, yeah, and you do have to just keep in mind a lot of what happened is out of your control. There are a lot of businesses that they maybe had a good base, but because of the pandemic, it was out of their control and they unfortunately had to shut down. But you just have to keep moving forward and see how you can continuously adapt.
Right. And now bouncing off of what Aman asked you about your entrepreneurship experience, I'd like to ask how exactly throughout like your experience as an entrepreneur, has your perspective on it changed at all? Whether it's due to like the COVID-19 pandemic or through another personal experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, we all know entrepreneurship is tough, and unpredictable events like the pandemic, it has the power to completely wipe you out. And I think Code Ninjas survived because we knew our why in our business model. You have to know your why behind what you do to have a strong business. And if your customers know your why, they're going to support you through anything that happens. And seeing customers stay with us all the way through the pandemic, as well as employees, it's a great feeling. Our program is set up for the kids to work kind of martial arts styled. So they'll start on white belt and move their way through the belt colors up to black belt. We recently, about 2 months ago, I believe, graduated our first black belt, and he was with us from the time that we opened. So he was actually one of our customers that stuck with us all the way through the pandemic. He just had this love for computer science. He created those relationships with the senseis, and he loved what he did. So he stayed with us through all the hardships. And that's because we knew our why. We knew that our end goal is to guide students through computer science, and teach them. And that's what he wanted. He wanted to be taught. So he stuck with us, and his family supported us all the way through.
That was really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. I think I've heard that before. I think it was Simon Sinek at a TED Talk, and I can definitely resonate with that lesson. So, other than that advice, is there any other advice you'd like to give anyone who wants to enter the field of business or entrepreneurship?
Um, I personally believe that a lot of people who are looking to get into business and entrepreneurship, there are a lot of strong-headed people. But my advice to them is you have to be willing to learn from others, as well as create strong connections with those people. Nobody is an expert, and we can all learn from each other. And you can also benefit from having networks. So don't necessarily shoot down someone who's trying to help you. You want to be able to create strong connections that way. In the future, you have a network of people that you can rely on who are going to support you and help you through any tough times that may come along that you can't control.
Collaboration and cooperation and learning from others is like key to maintaining a successful business.
Mhm.
So, like, the final question for today's interview, Shelby, how do you think entrepreneurship as an industry or career will change over the years? And how do you think it will grow in the future? What are your thoughts on it?
I think entrepreneurship is just becoming more accessible. It is still tough and difficult to pass through and to actually be successful. But I do believe with online structures, and more companies opening up to allowing anybody to open up a franchise, is definitely creating this kind of area that it is accessible to be able to get into. But once you get into it, you do have to work hard to be able to follow through. And there, unfortunately, again, there were a lot of small businesses wiped out due to the pandemic, but the ones that remained, they stayed alive because they were adaptable. Entrepreneurship, it's not going away, but I believe it is going to continue to trend and grow, especially through online.
That's probably the best way to summarize it, because again, entrepreneurship, like the COVID-19 pandemic, has just taught us how entrepreneurship is difficult, and running a business is not just like profit margin and all that. It's but persevering it through and making sure your business survives through such pandemic. So in a way, pandemic has taught us how entrepreneurship is not an easy task and how you need to be adaptable at any situation. So definitely, like, again, people are starting to get more resources about it, so they will learn. But just because they get more resources doesn't mean that the other skills, such as other essential skills, such as, again, persevering through challenges, would go away. So thank you so much for your insight about that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And thank you so much for attending this interview. We've learned quite a lot about the entrepreneurial process, from things like knowing your why, or the importance of setting up a network behind you for when some unexpected things will arise. And overall, it was incredibly informational.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I enjoyed all the questions you guys asked me. I may have even learned a little bit about myself.
For sure. Thank you so much. And now we will stop recording, and thank you so much for listening to our podcast.